Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of our little series here. In today's episode, it's going to be a little complicated, but I'm going to try to explain as much as I can. So let's just get started right away. First, we're going to open our player. First thing that I want to say is we're going to be using states today. So we're going to implement states, and I'm going to introduce that. We're going to do the very simple things, moving. So this entire video will be basically moving our character, which seems very easy, and it is, but we're going to be using states. So in order to do that, I have to delete all this. This is not, was in my reference, sorry. I was playing around with it, trying to figure it out earlier. So the first thing you're going to do is class name persistent state. So this is going to name the player. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a few variables. So we're going to create state, variable current state, variable velocity, and as always, this is just going to be vector2. So assuming you don't know how to move a player, that is fine. We'll get into that later as well. But the point of this video is to kind of help you understand how states work and how to use them. So that way later on in the series, we can implement different states. So for example, farming or whatever else you might want. So my goal is to kind of give you this project with an understanding of how to complete it later on, if you want, of course. And then we're going to have speed, and I'll make that 100. All right, next thing we're going to do is I'm going to be looking at a lot of my reference, by the way, because there is quite a bit to do. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our full player folder and create a new folder, and I'll call this states. So that way we can have all these states in there. We're going to make a new script, call this idle. In here, we're going to duplicate it, call it run, duplicate it again. We're going to have another one called stage manager. And then we're going to have one more that's called state. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go into our state manager. This one's going to be very easy. We're going to actually delete the extend, and we're going to have class name state manager. So if you don't know what class name is, this essentially creates a class. If you don't know what class is, essentially it's kind of creating our own extension of something. So for example, this is creating a kinematic body, which has a bunch of variables and functions inside them, right? So a class holds a bunch of functions and variables inside it. A class can hold, like I said, a bunch of variables and a bunch of functions. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have an idle. So I'm going to actually comment this out. We're going to have the idle state. So this is the idle state. I'll say state. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to the run state if I click something, obviously. So if I start running, then I go to the run state. And then if I stop running, I go to the idle state, right? So, etc., right? And then we might have other states that we'll add on later on. But for now, we're going to have the idle and run state, right? So this is the kind of idea that we're going to have. So we're going to be in the idle state, which is going to be a class. And we're also going to have the run state, which is also going to be a class. So the stage manager is going to help us manage these other subclasses, essentially. So these are going to be subclasses of this main class, kind of, if that makes sense. So think kind of, you have a mom. So if you have parents, they manage the kids, right? So they have kids that they manage, and maybe your parents have other parents who manage them, for example. So this is the main parent, essentially. This is the player, and this player is going to be checking with the stage manager, which is our parent, I suppose, our mom, if we can go outside, for example, right? So going outside is a state. So I hope that helps explain classes a bit. I was a bit jumbled up on the words there, but hopefully you kind of understand. If you have any questions about class or states after the video, feel free to put them down below in the comments, and I'll try to explain them as best as I can. I've tried to simplify this as much as I can because I find the other examples out there, like the GD scripts, not GD script, sorry, the people who have Godot, I forget what their name is, but they have a channel, right? The GD something, GD class. They also have state machines, but if I find as an introduction, it's very complex and it's very hard to understand right away. So hopefully this kind of simplifies things. So in our class, in our state manager, the first thing I wanted to do is function initialize. In our initialize, we're going to have like that. And then we're going to create these states. When you say states equals little curly bracket here. So we're going to have a bunch of states. It's going to be, this is a dictionary, by the way, if you don't understand the format. And then in this idle state, we're going to have say idle state, just like my reference here. And then here, it's not going to be comma, it's going to be that. And then we're going to copy this. And this is going to be our run state. So you might be wondering, oops, there we go, what these two are. So what these are also classes. These are our subclasses. So first thing we're going to have is obviously the states isn't declared, so we have to declare that. Variable states, there we go. And then we also have to go into our run and idle states and create those as well as classes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over to our idle. And what we're going to do is what we're going to do is actually extend state. Not state manager, we're going to extend state. So that's going to be a different script here as well. And then class name, idle state. All right, next thing I want to do is we're going to copy this over, go to run, and then same thing. That's going to be run state. And then also we have to make this the state class. So we're going to open our state script, and then we're going to do class name state. Awesome. Oh, sorry. Just checking my reference here. We also have to actually extend node 2D. What's going on? Oh, it's E extends. There we go. Because we're going to need some functions from node 2D. All right, now everything kind of should work fine. If you find that if you find this error, what we can do, I think we have all the classes. So what I can do now is I can just go to my project, reload current project, and it'll just reload. Open up our player again, open up our states, and there should be no errors. So that error doesn't actually do anything. It's just sometimes when you create a class, your game has, your engine kind of struggles to find them sometimes, but that's okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function called get state. So because this is our state manager, we're going to have a function in here that helps us find which state that we're trying to get, right? So for example, if you ask your dad, can I go outside? And your dad asks or says, go ask your mom would end up being the state manager. So your mom would be the one who says get state, and then we will return that state. So in here, what we're going to do is state has state name, then we'll return states dot get state name. And then else here we'll print, we can do print error, no state, like this. We'll do no state, state name. It exists. So what this is doing is we're going to go through our states, right? The states here, it's a dictionary, and we're going to see if we have the state idle or run. Like if I called either of those two, if I called anything else like attack, it wouldn't work, right? So if it has it, then we're going to return it. We're going to get it and return it. If it doesn't, so if for example, if I want to attack, it'll print an error, right? Because we don't have it yet. We didn't create it. All right, next thing we're going to do in our state, we're going to have a few variables. We're going to have change state. We're going to have animation. We're also going to have persistent state, and then we're also going to have variable velocity equals 0. And then in here, we're going to create a function called setup. There we go. And then in our function, we're going to have 3 arguments that we're going to call. The first one is going to be called change state. Next one is animation, and then persistent state. There we go. And then what we're going to do is very simple. Self dot change state equals change state. And then I'm just going to copy this 3 times. And essentially what we're doing is setting the animation to the animation and the persistent state to the persistent state. So this is where we hold everything that we have. Yeah, so this is where we hold all the variables. So we're going to have our animation player in here. We're going to have our state, the current state. We're also going to have the changed state function. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is have the physics process, and we're going to do persistent state dot move and slide. So we're going to move and slide with the persistent state dot. I'm not sure why it's not autocorrect completing for me, but that's okay. And then vector2 dot up. Okay, now let's play around with our idle state. So our idle state is going to have, no, sorry, you know what? Let's get started on our player GD. So now that we have the classes set up, all the other classes set up, we have our class run state, we have our idle state, we don't have any functions in them yet, we can't do anything inside these states, but what we're going to do is be able to go inside of those states. So the first thing we're going to do is in our player, we're going to function ready, and the first thing we're going to do is have stage manager, but we're going to do lowercase equals stage manager.new. So that way we have something to refer to for our stage manager. And then we're going to change state to idle. Nope, idle, like that. Can't be lower uppercase because in our stage manager we have idle lower state, right? All right, clear it up. Let me double check here. Ooh, stage manager. There we go. Let me do it like that. State manager. All right. Now that we have our state manager equal to our stage manager, we don't have change state class function yet, but we'll make that in a bit. Next thing we're going to do is add our get input function. So in this function, as you can tell, is we're going to check if something is being clicked. So as you might already know how to do this, I'll just kind of rush through it. But we're going to say, is action just pressed or not just pressed? We're going to do pressed. UI left. And then we're going to do, we're going to call move left. So we don't have the move left function yet, but we'll get that in a minute. So now what we're going to do is make one for each side. So we have UI right, we have up, and then we also have down. And we're going to go down here and say move down, we have move up, and we have moved right. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to want to call this function, get input, and we do that in our process function. So process delta get input, there it is. And then we're going to actually move our player, which we do by saying velocity equals move and slide velocity. There we go. And then one thing I'm going to add is just print our state so we know which state we're in. This is just for us. It's not for the computer. It's just so we can kind of keep track of what's happening. All right, and then there's 2 things that we have to do in our get input. We have to make sure that we're resetting our velocity to vector 2. every time. So that way we're not just completely adding to it. You'll kind of understand why we're doing this in a second. And then velocity equals velocity dot normalized times speed. So that way we can kind of estimate, or not estimate, but actually average down our velocity and have a proper speed. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to actually create our change state because that error is getting a bit annoying. So let's add our change state function. And then in here, what we're going to do is if state not equals null, we will state dot queue free. So essentially what we're going to be doing is I'll just add more and then you'll kind of understand why we're queuing free. So state equals state manager dot get state, and then we'll do new state name dot new, and then down there we'll do dot setup, which is a function that we have. Function ref, and then we'll do self dot change state. And then in there we'll have our animation player. We want to connect that. So we do animation player. And then we also do it on our self. And then last line we'll set, or no, two more lines, sorry. We're going to set our state name to state, where is it? This guy, new state name. And then we'll do state dot, nope, not state dot. We're going to add child now. Add child dot state. All right, what's going on here? Expected as member. Oh, there we go. Self. Okay, awesome. Our change state is working now. Obviously, we haven't moved left, whatever. None of that's working, but that's okay. So what's happening here is basically change state. So we have change state to idle, right? We're going to pass through idle, and in our state, we're going to create that state. Kind of, we're not creating it, but we are creating it. We have the dot new, right? So we're creating our new state idle, which is this guy. And then we're going to set it up. So as you can remember, we have in our state, we have the setup function that we made, right? So we're setting our animation, our change state, and our persistent state. Go back to player. And so that gives us our animation player. It gives us the self. It gives us the actual player. And we're just setting the name to what state we're actually in. So which is idle in this case, right? So we have the idle state, and it's going to add child, and it's going to say idle, right? The reason why we're queuing free is because the state is because if we have something already, we want to destroy it, right? If there's a state that exists, we want to delete it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually, before we do that, we want to add our functions for move. We're going to have move left. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to do state dot move left. And that is it, I believe. Yep. Okay. So what's happening? Okay, we'll do this for each one. So we're going to have, we'll do this. All right. So we're going to have move down, move up, and we're going to have move right. There we go. We're just going to copy paste that. All right. So now what's happening is we're going to, every time I click something, it's going to move left, for example. We're going to have move left, and then we're going to go into our current state, which exists, right? Which should be our child. And then we're going to check that state and see which one it is. Or not, we're not going to check it, but we're going to call this function move left, right? So in our idle state, we're going to have a few functions. The first one we're going to do is, obviously, we're going to want, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take all this, and I'm just going to copy paste it. Because I'm going into this function from our player and calling it into the idle state, right? And in our idle state, we don't want to be moving in our idle state. So we're going to change the state by doing change state dot call function idle. No, run, because that's what we want to do. We want to run. And then in our change states, in all of this, we're going to actually just copy paste it. So no matter what side we're doing, we're going to always run. And then in our run, we're going to go into our run. And this is where we're going to actually run. So I'm going to just copy paste real quick what I have. So the get input is very similar, but this is for releasing. So essentially, if I'm moving left and then I release, I want to play the idle now, right? So ignore this kind of, unless you understand it. I'll explain it in a second. But yeah, let's add our physics process. And in here, we'll do get input. There we go. And then we'll have our function move left. And then in our move left, we're going to do persistent state dot velocity dot x minus equals move speed. No, we're just going to do 1, sorry. And then we're going to copy paste this. No, sorry, I'm going to do it like this. Paste it 3 times. So we have move right, and then we have move down, and then we also have move up. All right, and then so this is where we want to make sure our direction is proper. So for our move right, we're going to go plus, and then for our move down, we're doing our y-axis. Same thing for up, we're doing our y-axis, and for our down, we're doing plus. So in order to move down, we have to, this one, plus. There we go. All right, and now, that should work properly. Now let's test it. Let's see what happens. Awesome. Now we can move around. And as you can see on the bottom, because we're printing our state right here, we always have our state on the bottom being printed. So whenever I'm running, it says I'm running. And then whenever I stop running, it says idle. Another thing you can do is go into remote on the top left, go into world, player, kinematic body, and you can check the object that exists, right? So whenever I move, it creates the run object, and when I stop, it deletes it and creates the run object, right? That's what we're doing right here in the change state. So we're deleting it, we're Q3ing it, and then we're creating our new state, which is going to be the idle one, right? So let's kind of go over this one more time. Hopefully, if you don't understand, that's okay. I'll just go over it one more time. Okay, so the first thing we're going to have is in our player. So I'm going to actually end the game. In our player, we initialize everything. We initialize the state with the state manager, velocity, and speed. So in here, the speed and velocity are how we move. Hopefully that makes sense already. In our ready function, we're going to initialize our stage manager class. So that way we have something to manage, right, or access. So here we have, and then in our stage manager, we have the idle, and then we have the run state, right? So now we can access these 2 states essentially, right, by also doing get state. And then going back to our player, we change state. So we change state to idle. So essentially, we're going to go into this function with idle. Is it not equal null, meaning is there something there? So is there a state that exists already? No. Okay, so we're going to continue because this is the ready function, meaning this is the first time we're running the game. So there's nothing there yet. All right, so we skip this. This doesn't happen the first time. So we go straight to here, straight to state manager. So we're going to set our state to stage manager dot get state with new state name. So we're going to go to our stage manager, right, which is back in here, and we're going to run get state with our new state name, which is idle, right? So if it has idle, which it does, there it is, we're going to state dot get the state name, which is idle, which is right there. So now we're setting our state. So if you go back to player, we have set our state right here to idle. So I'll go on the same line, set state to idle. or well, to new state name. That's technically what it's doing, right? And then it's created it, right? So dot new, meaning it has now made a new one that's equal to it, right? Because we don't want to set it to it, we want to duplicate it essentially. And then in our state, so we have our state actual state right here, and we're going to dot setup. So we're going to set it up by setting everything equal, right? The change state, the animation, etc., etc. So our new state idle, because we created a new node for it, has all these variables in it, right? And then going back to our player, we're going to set the name as well. So the name of the actual node, right? So the name of this node is player, right? This, you could technically skip this, but it's just to kind of, keep track of things. And then we're going to add the child, right? So this is where we actually add the node that we're going to be using, the state, right? All right, so that's the ready function done. Hopefully you understand the idle state. And so that's how that works, right? So now what's happening, our state is currently equal to idle, right? Now if I click left, it's going to move left, and it's going to state move left. We're going to go into our state, right, which is idle. So if we go to our idle, this guy is called the idle state, right? And then we're going to call the move left function, right, from our player, from state.moveLeft, right? In our idle, we're going to do this. And then in here, we're going to go to change state and call the function run. So what that means is we're going to call this one. We're going to change it to the run state, right? So now we go into this state. So we've called this state, and we're going to now call this function instead. Not instead, but as like that's what's happening, kind of, right? And then in this, we've essentially gone back to our player and changed our state to run, right? So because of called the run state, we have now changed the state to run. So in our run, now we've called the move left. We're moving. Hopefully this makes sense. So we're moving. And then what this does, so now we've gotten to this part, this helps us change back to idle, right? So if I were to delete this, it would still work, right? However, there's a problem. Okay, sorry, to play. So there's a problem. So our player can still move. It seems to work properly. However, there's a problem. If I go into my player, you can see the run state, even though I'm idle. So I haven't done anything, or I'm moving, and then I stop, but I'm still running. The run state is still there. So if there was something I wanted to do in my idle state, I can no longer do it because I'm not in my idle state, even if I'm idle, right? So this has its ups and downs. So we're going to go back into our run and add that. So hopefully this makes sense. So we have the physics process. We're going to call the get input, and then in the get input, we're going to check if we're releasing something. So if I've released the left, we're going to call the idle state. If I've released the right, I'm going to release the idle state, or call the idle state, sorry. So hopefully this makes sense. The video was pretty much done 3 minutes ago, but I just wanted to re-explain everything. Hopefully everything makes sense with our states. A lot of people will have the actual states in our player, right? So instead of creating it, they have it in the player. That's what the other tutorials you might find have. And hopefully you can kind of understand why they do that. But yeah, hopefully this video made sense. It was a really long video, but I think this will be worth it later on when we have other things. It'll make my life a lot easier and make your life easier. Hopefully this made sense. If it didn't, please comment down below. I'll try to help as much as I can. And yeah, if you guys like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, like, share with your friends. I really appreciate comments, so I take them to heart. So let me know what you guys think. All right, I'll see you guys next time.